Bonjour, bonjour. Bienvenue à Montréal, bienvenue chez nous. Merci d'avoir choisi Montréal comme destination et je suis certaine que vous aurez un excellent séjour à visiter nos environs. So, hello, welcome in my city, Montreal, and thank you for choosing to come over here and discover what Montreal has to offer, and I think you're going to have a very enjoyable stay. It's an honor for me to be speaking to you, well-educated people in urban planning, which a thing that I am not. I am an industrial engineer, so I know nothing about construction and land development, but I have the pleasure and the privilege of joining Luc Maurice, of whom I will be talking in a few minutes, to lead this phenomenal project of Mission Unitainés. So thank you for having me here. I think Craig's presentation is a very nice segue because I can talk about my initiative and then you'll understand where it fits because Craig has given such an interesting overview of the situation in Montreal, but as well as in Quebec. So Mr. Luc Maurice is a developer and he's the owner of a group of residences for the elderly. And so he has, in his complexes, he has 14,000 residents throughout the province. Those are high-end complexes with the pool and the bowling alley and really nice places for the autonomous elderly to be living once they decide to leave their house and move into such a complex. So Mr. Maurice is really a leader in the quality of life of the elderly through his housing, but also he likes to speak and act so that society moves along and understand aging differently, and he sees aging as a positive thing, a thing that should be enjoyed and not seen as sickness. Mr. Maurice, he's a visionary, and he had concerns about the elderly that could not afford to be living in his residences, as well as those who needed some care. And so he created this project of Mission Unitainés. This project aims at responding to two situations: an aging population. So in Quebec, not only do we have a housing problem, we have a very much aging population, and see every year 37,000 people will be joining the 75 plus group. So it's really an aging population, and these people have new needs in regards to their housing. But as you see, there's about 40% of them that their income is below $30,000 a year. So it's an aging population, but also many of them have low income. And so in the situation where they have to change their location, well, they have no place to go. Because right now, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,600. So if your income is below $30,000, there's no way in hell you can find a new lodging for you. And just yesterday, I met a woman and she lives on the 3rd floor and she needs a new place to live. So, you can't find that if your revenue is so low. So the project that was created was to develop an initiative to be building urgently 1,000 units for the low-income elderly throughout the province. And the rent is $650 a month. And so we were kicked off through the Mission Unitainés was kicked off to build 1,000 units, 10 buildings of 100 apartments throughout the province of Quebec with an average rent of $650 a month. We kicked it off with 10 buildings, and then this is the building. One of the key of the program is that we have one single building that we replicate. So this building has been fully optimized, both for the quality of living as well as construction simplicity, cost, and velocity. And so this is a very well-designed building. That's one key element. And the other one is making it really quick because there's a crisis. And also in construction, as you all know, fast is low cost. So it's very important. If you do it very, very quickly, you save a lot of money. And our construction cost, well, the total cost of project is an average $270,000 per door. And in the current market, equivalent building right now runs at between $400,000 and $450,000 a door. So we're really less expensive because of this cookie cutter approach. One building that we replicate and then we do really quickly. We're in partnership with the cities. So, where's my map? Here. So the project was kicked off with 10 buildings. The costs were so low and good, and the projects were doing so well that we asked the government, because it's public funded the project, we asked the government if we could do an 11th building with the same amount that we had received. And so they agreed, so we added an 11th, and just 2 weeks ago, the government announced an additional investment, and now we're going to be up to 17 buildings. So right now, we're currently having 17 construction sites throughout the province of Quebec. We have actually delivered our first building last week, and from now till summer next week, it's like popcorn. You know, it's once a month we open a new building. So it's really an emergency response to the need of the low-income elderly, and we're very proud of it. And this is done through the leadership of a developer. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Pardon my getting up, but I'm nosy and I wanted to see their slides and I couldn't, so there we go. Again, I'm Angela Brooks. I am excited to talk to you a little bit today about some of the things that are happening in the States. Today I'll be wearing my hat as the immediate past president of the American Planning Association. You know, I think a lot of my presentation really kind of confirms everything you just said about Canada. We don't have enough units. They cost too much to build, and they take too much time. I'm kind of jealous when you talked about your speed of delivery. I don't think I've ever delivered a unit in less than 5 years. So, with that said, over the last few years, the American Planning Association with the National League of Cities has joined forces to do the Housing Supply Accelerator, which really kind of came to address the United States. We are finding ourselves short about 4 million units across the country, and that's including suburban and rural areas. It's actually increasing in those areas. And so we started thinking about what are the biggest issues that regulatory barriers that we do tend to impact. It is housing. And so we spent the past couple of years talking about that. And it's really been kind of the topic in every conference I've been to. And we knew the related issues of housing and zoning reform were attracting really a lot of attention for policymakers across all political lines. I'm sure those of you who are not in the States are very familiar with how polarizing politics are in the United States right now, that the fact that we don't have enough housing tends to not be one of them. Now, how we pay for it gets very, very political, but the fact that we need more housing is not. And so it's really been a process that we've gone through, and partnering with the National League of Cities was really important because as planners, we do all of these kind of policies, we come up with all these plans, but it's really the elected leaders that do the implementation. So that's why the partnership with the National League of Cities was super, super, super important. And so we brought everybody together. So we had basically planners and elected leaders. We also had Airbnb and Zillow, who almost like never get along with planners. We had the home builders, we had the mortgage financiers. So we all sat in a room over a period of a year, had some really fun conversations, that's the word I'm going to use, to really talk about what are the barriers to really increasing the amount of housing supply, and how do each of us contribute to that. And I make the fun joke that as the president of the American Planning Association, I took center stage at the National Home Builders Conference. And so any of you who are urban planners in the room know that is almost never going to happen because they don't generally like us. It was also the most least diverse room I've ever been in my life. And I realized I was really, really poor because home builders have some good money. But nevertheless, it was a great opportunity to really talk about these are the things we can align with and we can really advocate for together. So this is kind of the model of what we used. We worked with our communities. We had 4 major sessions. One was on regulatory, land use, zoning. We had one on finance. We can't talk about construction and housing supply right now without talking about the impacts of the supply chain. It's trash, which is impacting both timing and availability and cost of materials. And then we really did a whole lot of sessions just really talking about how do we have these conversations throughout communities. And what came out of that is a housing supply accelerator playbook. And this was released last May. It has really 2 educational purposes. One, it gives people ideas of things they can do like right now, because so often, particularly for those of you who are planners, even developers, you know everything takes forever. So what can we do right now? And it also provides scalable and practical ideas for what can take from local and context. Secondly, it's a model for conversations that need to happen within communities. We have to start having conversations on what housing looks like in our communities. 75% of the United States is zoned single family, just is the thing. And when we talk about supply and demand is gonna require way more than a single family housing, but many of us, like me, I'm from Seattle. Back when Seattle was a sleepy city, I'm used to a single family house. I just moved to Philadelphia and I live by myself and I have a 3-bedroom apartment. So I myself have to rethink about what space should mean to really accommodate the types of housing that we need to do. And so the playbook really recognizes that. And I will say, as someone who's helped write a lot of policy documents for the American Planning Association over the years, it's actually user friendly. You don't have to be a nerdy planner or educator wonk to really understand it. It really is user friendly. So I'll kind of skip that slide and get my little note. So these are some of the strategies, and the playbook talks about tackling housing supply as a system that starts with planning and analysis. The goals really focus on housing supplies that we use to really talk about regulatory reform. So zoning, land use. So often we look at zoning code updates, but we don't update our building codes, and so they're not in alignment. ADUs is a very good example. Lots of cities are doing ADU work, but they don't update their building codes, and that's not in alignment. So you have this great policy, but then you can't really build them. So things like that, permitting, are really part of the goals and the outcomes. We often plan for what we want, but we regulate for what we don't want. There's a misalignment in how we're going about the functionality of the work that we do. And so it's really looking at how do we harmonize our legacy of regulatory systems that really reflect the realities of how we live. So many zoning codes haven't been updated in my lifetime, so we are zoning for how we lived in the 50s and 60s, and we're living way differently now. So how do we bring that in alignment? And it really discusses these 14 strategies for planning and land use reforms that I won't go into detail, but you can kind of see them here. It's kind of interesting now that I work for an actual elected person who's not a fan of ADUs, and I've spent the last 2 years really talking about ADUs. So, you know, I hope never she Googles me and sees any of my speeches. It'd be a very interesting conversation. At least awkward. I'm sure some of the people who are very ADU friendly will definitely do that. Since we love QR codes, here's access to the playbook. It's free to download. If you don't get the QR code, you literally could type in Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook. It will be your #1 hit, either from APA or the National League of Cities. You know, I know this is something that's been unfolding here in Canada. We found over my 2 years as APA president, I got to go to several planning conferences across the world. It was a conversation in every single one of them, from New Zealand to Australia to South Africa. So, you know, we really have to start thinking about how do we increase housing supply across the world. We're seeing, except for the US maybe, record numbers of migration. So we're seeing people moving all over the world. So we have to start thinking about the global housing crisis. UN Habitat has said we need to be producing 96,000 affordable housing units per day to meet the need of the world. And so if you think about that, you think about where you live, you know we're nowhere near that. And the number of people who are needing housing is continuing to grow. And so we've learned that we've got to have the hard conversations, particularly educating our elected leaders, because there are still, the loudest people at the mic are still the NIMBYs. Some cities in the United States have great NIMBY movements. I'm actually impressed at the number of things they know happening in Philadelphia that I don't know about, given my title. I'm to see that, but we have to really start giving our elected leaders the tools they need to serve as leaders in these areas, to have these tough conversations and make these really tough policy decisions. And we have to think about the language that we're using to talk about it. Density is kind of an off-putting word, diversity of housing, or even giving examples. I use my dad as an example. He lives in Seattle, which is ungodly expensive, but there's not a whole lot of things in the market that he can afford to downsize and live in something that's more reflective of how he should be living at 80 with limited mobility. And so if you want people to age in place, we have to think about that. One of our biggest partners in the US is the AARP, Association of retired persons. Wait, I'm old enough to be in it now, I should know that. I got my membership card. But they have been really great on really producing a toolkit for ADUs. They have sample zoning ordinances, they have some sample designs. So they've been a really great partner in thinking about how do we start helping our folks age in place, but also how do we help people, your kid goes to college and they come home, they can't afford to live. So we've got to start thinking about how do we house people, as I would say, from the womb to the tomb. I don't know, I'm a little morbid. So lastly, what's next? From the Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook, we're now in the America's Housing Comeback, and it's something we just launched, again, partnered with the NLC, and we just announced 16 cities that will be participating in this, and it'll be cities that are getting extreme technical assistance from planners, elected leaders, the home builders, the whole like, and they'll be getting technical assistance to address all of the things we talked about already in regarding to removing barriers for housing supply. So if you go on this QR code, you can join the newsletter and get helpful tips. NLC just released several kind of 15 kind of case studies and helpful guides for housing supply. So you'll see a lot of resources coming out that you can tweak for your own city, your own country, but this is kind of the context of what we're working on, and I look forward to having a conversation.
Good job.